Chapter 15. Chief Hernandez's voice brought me back to the present. It says here in the "this all of the time" letter, not emails. And not all the time, I protested. It was every year on the anniversary of his death, and those were direct threats like, "You're dead, bitch, for what you did to Shane." These are more like warnings. And it stopped when I left Knightsbridge for good. Or I thought it had. "Ashley, I wish you would have told me," told Amber. "Told someone?" Elle said. "I was in the file. I wasn't hiding anything. Besides, I'd hoped never to have to think about it again." "Sounds like someone isn't happy you're back," Hernandez said. "Any idea who that might be?" "Janetta McDonald blamed me for Shane's death, but you guys didn't find anything," I said. By you guys, I meant the cops in general, of course. Neither Elle nor Hernandez had been with Knightsbridge PD back then. "What about other friends of Shane's? Some ex-girlfriend or something?" Elle asked. "Or other family?" "As far as I know, Janetta and Shane's parents are dead. They have cousins in Utah or something, but aren't close. We're not going to get very far on a cold case like this by questioning the victim," Hernandez broke in, shooting Elle a look. "We need to review all the files and assign an investigator." Elle glared at Hernandez, but the chief spread his hands. "It's a dead coyote." And a threatening note. "I can't justify some kind of all-out effort unless something happens. Especially not just because it's your family." Elle relented. "Yeah, I get it. Put someone good on it, though, and start with some decent forensics. I'll back you up at budget time." Hernandez sighed and nodded. "I'll do what I can." "Come on, Ash," Elle said. "Let's go home. I need to go back by Will's. He can bring me home afterward." Elle pointed her finger at my nose. "Straight there, straight back, and keep your eyes open, the both of you. If you see anything funny, call me right away." "Oh, come on, Elle. Nothing's going to happen in broad daylight." "How do you know?" And she was right, I didn't. Except bad things happened at night. That's what I'd always believed, and ever since that night I am living proof. As Elle was licensed to carry concealed weapons, and was clearly on my side. At least for Amber's sake, I wasn't going to argue with her. On the other hand, Amber wasn't happy, because Elle had invited Will to stay with me, but it eventually saved her from feeling like she had to be hospitable all the time. It probably helped our sisterly relationship in the end, especially since Will turned out to be a better domestic than I was and kept the house spotless. How humiliating. Elle ordered spotlights on motion detectors to be installed around the property, and my sister seemed to settle into a new rhythm. This was just one of the reasons I imagine my twin loved Elle so much. She was a bastion of safety and security. She radiated alpha during these moments, and knowing my own limits, both of us siblings accepted beta female roles. Think this is where I first began to consider just what it meant to be a pack. Though they weren't lycanthropes, this felt like a home now, as if Amber's attitude had now changed. Seemed I was back inside something instead of outside for the first time in years. Will accepted his beta male role with equanimity, which was funny as there was no alpha male, unless you counted Spanky the Schnauzer, who was about as alpha as dogs came. I guess Elle got to play both roles. Detective Bromley came by and interviewed us all again, and said it would be a couple of weeks before anything came back from the lab. He was a big, florid man who sweated too much and exercised too little, but Elle said he was competent enough. Not much evidence to go on, though, so I didn't get my hopes. He did say he was interviewing everyone, including my chief suspect, Janetta McDonald, but he wasn't about to disclose any details, not even to Elle apparently. Chapter 16. "You know, Will, I think you should take Ashley out of town," Elle announced at the breakfast table on the morning before the night of the full moon. I'd been wondering how I was going to work that one, and this seemed like a pretty good idea to me, no matter what prompted it. "Cool," JR said. "Can I come?" We all laughed, a bit raggedly, I'll admit. "What?" he asked us, with the most innocent lack of guile on his face. "Maybe another time, sweetie," my sister said. "I think your Aunt Ash and Uncle will want to be alone." "Wait. What?" my nephew said. "When did Will become my uncle?" "Yes, Amber," Elle teased. "Just when did that happen?" "Just thinking ahead," she sing-songed. "Don't blame me for stating the obvious." Will grinned and looked at me, but I pouted, not exactly certain why, except to reflexively oppose my twin. "The obvious is rushing things, sis. I only just got back into town, and you're trying to marry me off to my high school Sweetheart. Is that what I am? Will leaned forward intently. And what's wrong with that? Amber chimed in. Maybe you soured me on marriage. Ouch, Amber said, and I saw my barb had scored. Perhaps too deep. Sorry, low blow, I said. I know it wasn't your fault. Her look tried to wither me where I Saturday been there done that, she said. Coldly, and in that moment seemed older than I was, which was actually our usual relationship. I love when two beautiful girls fight over me, Will broke in, but I agree. With Elle. We need to get out of this fortress. The investigation's going nowhere, and unless whoever is sending the notes makes another move, it won't. Yeah, I knew this was too good to be true, I said. Why was I always getting kicked out of places? If I wasn't being asked to leave by boutique hotels that didn't like my reviews or cruises because I had a bad habit of sneaking into the cruise mess in my search for the human part of the story, then I was being passed around from family member to family member like the perpetual problem child. Damn, and just when I thought the crisis had brought us closer. Then again, I guess I was a handful sometimes. Fine. I'll take Will back to the city with me. Great. I finally get to see how the other half lives, he said. There were hisses and boos all around except for JR, who laughed uproariously like the kid he was. I doubt he knew what he was laughing at, except his elders' antics. Elle said, actually, I think you and Will should go stay in a hotel. Someone might be watching your place. I'll be guarding Amber and the house back here. And I called in a favor with a bail bondsman I know who has a couple of security guys. Why? I pointed an accusing finger at Elle. Are you trying to dangle some bait for the what do you call it? Perpetrator. So what if I am? A smile spread across my face. So what if you are? Anything to get away from here. Love you, Amber said. Love you too, I replied. But I don't see you objecting. In fact, it had been frustrating as all hell, sleeping in the guest room with Will, but not, sleeping with him. At least not the full Monty, if you know what I mean. And no, I will not give details. You can fill in the blanks. But anyway, fun and frustrating because I hadn't fully convinced myself getting back with him was the right thing to do, and going all the way was just going to make the inevitable breakup that much harder, pardon the pun. That was our usual pattern anyway back in high school. Things would go along good for a while, closer and closer, and even, yes, that close, and it was wonderful, but then the explosion would come. My explosion. I knew it was me. Always me. Will hardly ever got mad, just irritated when I would sabotage things when I felt like we were getting too close. That's what it felt like now, getting too close, so going away would either finish the pattern with fireworks, or maybe we could derail the speeding train and do something different. Maybe if we got away from my family and this pressure and I was on my own home ground, I could get past my fear of flying and think about being with Will the way he wanted to be with me. Then I thought about what I was, and all the fear came back again. There was just no way I could tell him if he would even believe me until I proved it. That is, perhaps by ripping him to shreds the way I'd done to goofy dorky hunky innocent Shane. I felt sick. Ash, Will jogged my elbow. I think we lost you. Just thinking, I said with a forced smile. I turned to the alpha female. Okay, boss, what do we do? Elle laid down the plan. Will and I were okay with it, and surprisingly so was Amber. I guess I didn't expect her to be willing to play me in hopes of drawing the threat into the open. Never thought of her as brave, but there are different types of courage. Will took me to the Claremont Hotel in Oakland, not my apartment after all. The place was a marvel, towering like an ostentatious grande dame on the hills overlooking the Oakland-Berkeley line, like a California version of the Hotel Christopher Reeves and Jane Seymour haunted in Somewhere in Time. It nestled among the pines and towering fragrant eucalyptus trees across the slope. Hard to believe that the old Highway 13 was just over the rise. It gave such an illusion of remoteness. Since I'd written the Hotel Estella review, the management offered to comp our stay, as I normally couldn't afford a couple $100 a night just for grins. I must admit I did imply that I was going to do a follow-up article sometime in the future. I might. You never know. Will laughed and said he could handle it. I reminded myself that he had taken over the family business and was actually reasonably well off, if not super rich. That got me thinking about the fact that none of the local hotties had snapped him up yet, and that I was pretty lucky that he wanted me after all these years. That led me to wondering about the house he'd bought, my house, which was so Weird but so romantic. You know, a lot of girls think they would kill for a guy like Will, but like most fantasies, when they actually start happening, they aren't quite the same as you think they will be. One girl's romantic beau is another's creepy stalker, and what was I supposed to think about him? Sleeping in my room, I mean in my old house, every night? Was that love or infatuation or obsession? We settled in for an afternoon at the pool, and a cozy evening on the veranda, shrouded in secrecy that I claimed was necessary to avoid my legions of rabid fans. Haha, the hotel had even let us come and go through the employee entrance. We stayed up late and got up late the next morning. I dragged Will out to Mill Valley, where I ran him ragged hiking from the shadows of Muir Woods on up and over the Dipsy Trail to the bluff above Stinson Beach and back. Moonfall was coming that evening, and I had so much energy I thought it would just be easier to tucker Will out so I could sneak away and make the change without interference. We had dinner back on the terrace of the hotel's restaurant. He ate enough for 2 and me for 3. Damn girl, he joked, I'm gonna have to get a side job just to feed you. Oh, it's your responsibility to feed me now, is it? I teased. If you want it to be. He took my hand and caressed it, and I let him. I think Uncle will sound it pretty good. Will. I know you don't want to talk about it. Just not yet, okay? Not until this thing with the threats is resolved, and what? Nothing. Look, he said, we can leave Knightsbridge. Fitzjanetta, she's so attached to the park and the canyon she won't follow you, and you'll be gone. And once you're out of her field of view she'll stop. She and her animal rights wacko buddies can kiss my ass as we leave them in the dust. Can get it. Manager for the landscaping business and travel with you, or sell out entirely and start over somewhere far away. I sighed. That sounds lovely. Like paradise. Then why not? I just couldn't tell him. Not yet. Besides, there was Elle's plan, which Will almost seemed like he'd forgotten about. He was such a sweet live in and out kind of guy, which I guess fit with my personality too, except I tended to be the worry about tomorrow kind of girl. You can tell by my bitten fingernails. So different from Amber's long perfect ones. It's complicated, Will. Look, I really like you. You used to say you love me. I do love you, I admitted to him. But that may not mean exactly what you think it does, or it may not be enough, or the timing might just not be right. So can we just leave it at that for a while? That we love each other. Pushy bastard, aren't you? I smiled to soften my words. I know what I want, and what I want is you, Ash. Always have. You've been waiting around all this time for me? Never went out with anyone else in all these years. Not so many years. I've kept busy. You didn't answer me. Will sighed. I never asked anyone out. I took Denise Palos out a couple of times on pity dates because Carl begged me. We didn't even hold hands. That's all. You really did wait for me? I guess the disbelief came through in my voice, because he showed a touch of anger. Yes, I did. You say that as though it was a bad thing. He stood up. It wasn't. It was a noble thing, a good thing. I wanted to wait because you're worth waiting for, Ashley Scott. And I'm really sorry you can't see it. But don't try to diss me for it. I gotta pee, he ended and stomped off toward the restaurant's facilities. Wilker. I signaled the waiter and ordered a bottle of champagne. That had not gone well. Maybe I could smooth it over. When he came back, face and hands damp from the sink, I had 2 glasses poured. A toast, I said. To what? He asked, intrigued. To my stupidity. Did you order a Magnum? He quipped. Watch it, buddy, I winked. I'm trying to apologize here, okay? Now drink your toast. I'd rather drink my champagne. We'll raise the glass to your stupidity. He drained it. So did I. Look, it was really romantic or noble or whatever for you to have waited for me these past 5 or 6 years, but it's a lot of pressure. I've been footloose and fancy-free for all that time, and now I come back to my hometown and you want me to just pick back up like nothing has changed. Some things have changed, but not others, he said a bit cryptically. That's life. Okay. He held up a hand. I'll back off. I've waited this long. I'll wait some more. I wondered how long he would wait, and for a moment almost gave in to the impulse to polish off the bottle, drag him up to our room and give him the night of his life. Or maybe vice versa, since I hadn't had my ashes hauled in quite some time, and it had never been as good as it was with Will. That thought stopped me in my musings for a moment. I realized it was true. No sex had ever been as good as with Will, even though it was just early awkward. Teenage backseat stuff mostly. I guess what they say is right. It's not so much about what you do as who you're with. And I had brought Will with me in my mind to a lot of lonely nights on the road. Then why the hell was I fighting him so hard? I glanced up at the twilight sky and could feel the moon getting ready to break over the horizon, and that gave me my answer, at least for tonight. Later I slipped a crushed Ambien into his glass and made sure he drank it all, and then led him up and tucked him in after a hot bath. His snores assured me that I could do what had to be done that night with him none the wiser. Maybe it was just putting things off, but sometimes that's all I could do. Sleep well, tree jockey, I whispered and kissed his forehead as I headed out to answer the call of nature and the autumn moon. Chapter 17. There's a kind of intoxication in fear. Just a tingle of excitement that leaves a catch in the breath. A chemical reaction that spikes the endorphins and leaves you with a sigh of relief as the tickling jitters pass. The scent. A fear that cocks the head of a wolf, sensing prey, and the thrill of the chase rushing through the spirit, like a hot flush of blood to the veins. That's what was overtaking me now. I was ready. It was time past time. I had to change. Put it off too long. The shift was upon me. My head snapped back, my back bowed, and my legs collapsed under me as I slid to all fours. A ripple through my belly heaved, and I heard my bones crack and felt the slice of pain across every aspect of my synapses. I dry heaved, and the wave of nausea washed the pain through me as my skin slit and slid over my flesh, and my muscles took on a meaner and leaner look. The wolf came over me in waves like the mirage on a horizon, rippling hair and fur and blood and bone. My feet elongated, and it seemed like my fingers splayed from hands to claws and back again. When I thought I couldn't take it anymore, my head snapped out and I screamed as the muzzle slid into place, replacing mangled flesh. I howled and 100,000 howls called back. Crouched and shook my pelt, sending blood and gore flying all directions as once again I was reborn. I knelt, my forepaws in the grass, then sprang on my feet or my paws, whatever word described them best today. I raced along the edge of the patch of forest, past blurring brush and trees. Smells surrounded me, overrode me for a while, and humanity deserted me for at least a mile. I ran until I could comprehend what I was once again. Ashley Scott, werewolf, writer, sister, twin, mate of Will Stenfield, though he didn't know it yet, nor did my human half, but the bitch part would work on that. My eyes saw into every shadow. They pierced the depths of the dark with a fluorescence that human vision cannot. I'd forgotten the joy of truly being free. As a wolf, my only responsibility was to my belly, to my heart, to my family. I thought of my mate asleep back at the hotel room and smelled him on my fur. I licked him from my skin and tasted him upon my lips once again. The musky scent of mown lawns, the rich loam of moist earth, his tangy sweat and salty, acrid taste until he showered, all melted into earthy scents of cedar, pine, and vetiver grass. My man, I marked him, and I found myself upon his trail. We'd walked here today, I thought as I bolted out of the trees near the hotel's pool. Night full of shadows, I slipped beneath the gate to the pool house where I'd left a spare change of clothes earlier that day. As I'd given them a great review, the staff at the Claremont gave me more access to the workings behind the scenes. This served me now, as I knew the areas that were often overlooked. In the quiet dead of night, I told myself I could just sleep in a corner underneath the benches inside the locker room until the dawn, when Ashley would take over and the wolf would slip away once again. My mind seemed so much clearer when I let out the wolf, like cobwebs being swept out of my brain. Everything distilled into its simplest forms. Love, eat, sleep, pray, and thank God above that I was what I was. Right then I wanted nothing else. Unfortunately, what my mind wanted, what the rational human me said, didn't make the wolf bitch happy at all. She wanted to run and hunt and run some more, to smell and taste and howl and mate under the looming moon. She wanted Will to be there with her. She wanted him to be what she was. The she, the I, the whoever we were took over, and despite best intentions, ran us out of the pool house, back under the gate, and off into the night of the hills above Berkeley. Tilden Park and other state and local lands formed a wall against development to the east, and so I ran northeastward along the ridges and hills all the way to San Pablo Reservoir. In that peculiar pellucid state, my two minds melded, the animal and the woman, into something more than either. I knew what I was doing quite clearly. The animal did not control me now, not after 30 or more changes, but neither did I control it. Instead I was just myself in a different state of mind. Have you ever been consumed by desire or other strong emotion? Anger, grief, depression? You were still yourself but changed different. That's what it was like for me. In human form, the thought of chasing down an animal and sinking my teeth into its warm flesh would have revolted me, but now it seemed like the most reasonable and desirable thing, and I had to have what I desired. If I could not have Will in this form. And oh, wouldn't that be a surprise, 100-pound furry wolf bitch leaping into bed with him. Then I would hunt, kill, and eat. I picked up the trail of a yearling buck, full of power and life. He would be small. This part of California was too hunted out of really big racks to ever see the magnificent stags the Pacific Northwest boasted. So I had no fear of being gored. There was a good reason wolves in the wild hunted in packs. Not even a great gray male could take down something like a full-grown caribou by himself, much less a beta bitch like me, but this one smelled hardly larger than I was. He'd meandered here and there, nibbling on shoots and low-hanging branches, dropping scat and leaping small streams. I leaped them too, closing in on the buck until I spotted him in a thicket of manzanita. When he spooked, I was after him, and over a short sprint I was faster, with my ranging lope eating up the ground between us. In the night my senses outmatched his, my strength the greater, my hunger tipping the balance. I sank my teeth into his haunch, and when he shook me off I snapped and hamstrung him. After that, it was a mercy to open his throat and let his life spill out on the ground. Don't weep for the buck, dear reader. He has his place in the great web of nature. Without him we would have no children of the night, no songs to the moon of wolf and cousin coyote, no grace of puma, or in times long past no great grizzly or even tribes of man. And without those ferocious predators, the trees and bushes and all the growing plants would be stripped of their flowers and shoots and bark, and all would soon fall under the predations of the herds of millions of grazing creatures. Nature is a balance, and for this one night I was truly part of that. If you want to weep for something, weep for yourselves who have never known this kind of life. Once I had eaten my fill, I left the kill for the others that would come, the bobcat and the vulture and the condor and the other carrion eaters that must also feed nature's garbage crew, who would render death into new life in a never-ending cycle. Chapter 18. The pool house gave me a place to clean up and change. Despite the joys of the change, I always felt relieved when it had ended. It was so fraught with danger, from trigger-happy hunters to traps, or merely the possibility that my stash would be found and I would have to try to sneak back to the room naked at 6 in the morning. Speaking of returning to the room, oh, Miss Scott. The concierge waved me over. You have a package. My heart thudded against my chest as I stared at the box in his hand. This wasn't in the plan. No one should be sending me anything about the size of a compressed oval hat box. It was shrink-wrapped with my name in black permanent ink on the outside and no return address. Do you know who left this for me? I asked as he handed it over. Smelled like flowers and the green scent of grass and cut stems, but that didn't make sense. No one was supposed to know I was here, which meant someone was following us or had bugged us or something, maybe through one of our phones. I was always suspicious of those GPS apps. It came in with the flower delivery guy. The concierge tilted his head. Ooh, maybe it's a gardenia. They sometimes wrap them up on ice like that. Maybe your boyfriend got it for you. Maybe, I said, but I wasn't betting on it. I woke Will up when I got to the room and opened the package. It wasn't a gardenia. It was an animal heart, a canine's to be exact, bigger than a chihuahua but just about the size of a cocker spaniel. Before the first change I wouldn't have known that, but now somehow I did. The room phone rang. Don't answer that, I said. I was spooked and all I wanted to do was get out of here. It's just the wake-up call. I set it for 7, and if I don't answer it'll just keep ringing. The minute he picked up the hotel landline, my own cell phone went off. Looked at the caller ID. It's Amber, I said, and answered. But it wasn't Amber, it was Elle on Amber's line. I just wanted to tell you, Ashley. Elle's voice was muffled, and it sounded hoarse, like there was a catch in it. Spanky's gone. Got any ideas? Elle wasn't usually sentimental, but she was about that dog if anything. I stared in horror at the heart on ice, dreading the thought that passed through my brain. Nobody could be that sick, could they? I told her about what I just received. Elle cursed like a sailor, dropping F-bombs left and right. There goes the plan, having Amber wear a wig and pose as you while we keep her guarded. Somehow the perp figured out where you are. Yeah, I got that, I said drily. What now, maestro? You're not safe there anymore. I'm not safe back at your house. Safer than in some hotel. Why don't Will and I go to my apartment? There's no one to help protect you there either, Elle argued. Come on home, Ashley, I could hear Amber say in the background. Funny, I think that's the first time I'd heard that in a long time. Home. Maybe that was the difference between love and like between family and friends. Your family might drive you crazy and vice versa, but when the chips are down, they'll be there. It brought a lump to my throat. Okay, I husked. We'll come home. Will nodded solemnly as I clicked off my phone, then I took the battery out. Yours too, I said, pointing at his old Nokia. No battery, no tracking. Let's search our stuff, he said as he complied. We did but didn't find anything. Hey, we're not some kind of secret agents, all right? Maybe the police have a scanner or detector gizmo. I put it out of my mind as we packed, making sure to keep the bloody carton intact for evidence. Come to think of it, I doubted it was Spanky's. I would have known by the smell, wouldn't I? I hoped. I prayed. When we got home, the house seemed like a tomb. Amber stayed seated on the davenport in the family room, a big glass of wine in her hand, and looked at me with accusing eyes red from crying. Elle met us halfway and quivered with energy and anger. My mother floated above them, her ethereal arms outstretched, as if she wanted to hold them. They couldn't see her, but it made me feel a bit better to know she was there. Where's JR? I asked as Will dropped our suitcases. At his father's, Elle replied. We thought it best to hold off a few days on telling him, just in case Spanky comes back. He's not coming back. Amber stood up. Not until Ashley gets her shit together. She trailed off as Elle put a hand on her arm. My sister looked at me with wounded resentment, and I couldn't blame her. I know. I'm sorry. Amber looked like she wanted to say something nasty and cutting, but held back. You gotta give her credit for that. Like Dad says, we're not responsible for our feelings, just our actions. Sometimes I can't stand him too because he's usually right. It's annoying. Will made himself scarce and went up to my room. We dropped off the cooler at the police station on the way into town and had spent a few minutes talking with Knightsbridge's finest. This is all my fault, MB. I apologized again. Damn straight it is. Amber sniffed. She looked miserable, and this time that didn't make me the least bit happy. Amber, Elle scolded. We talked about this. No, Amber turned on Elle. You talked, I listened. Well, I'm tired of listening. Somebody's going to have to take matters into her own hands, she said, and she headed for the garage. Amber, don't do anything foolish. Elle followed her, sounding just like my mother. I winced, remembering all of those fights we had when we were in high school. And I had refused to give my sister the car keys when she had a mat on. She loved to drive recklessly at high speeds when she was pissed off. Hopefully, Elle could talk her down. Alone in the room for the moment, at least, with no corporeal beings, I rounded on my mother, who was looking at me with sorrow in her eyes. Can't you do anything? Mom sighed and looked heavenward as if listening to a voice I couldn't hear. After a moment she said, I can tell you this, dear. You're going to have to stop playing the victim and take responsibility for your actions. What does that mean? I railed at her. I can't just tell everyone I'm a werewolf. How will that solve anything? Blood calls to blood, Ashley, and you have a blood debt on your hands. Maybe it's time you figured out what the spirits want from you. She said this as she briefly cradled my cheek and then disappeared. I sighed and went to the bedroom. Will was sound asleep and snoring, which bugged me. You'd have thought he'd had the best night's sleep last night, going to bed early and all. Guys, I pulled my laptop out from under the bed and started scouring the net. By dinner time, I had some idea of what I had to do. After a glum meal of leftovers, we all went to bed early. I fell asleep immediately. After all, I hadn't had much rest last night. Will had gone down to the living room and watched television, and I didn't even notice when he crawled back under the covers. Chapter 19. This part one pieced together from talking to Sean after the whole thing was over and filled in a few details. Okay, I made up a few details, but hell, I am a writer. Sean Gottlieb finished cleaning up after the dog in the pet carrier, cursing the day he ever took up with Janetta McDonald. He stared at the poor little miniature schnauzer, who looked at him with the saddest eyes. He'd had to kidnap the pet and keep him at his place, as the animal shelter was the first place they would look, or maybe Janetta's. Eventually he was supposed to pretend to find the dog, which would give him the opportunity to cozy up to one of the twins. I'm sorry, Spanky, but the bitch has got me wrapped around her little finger. Spanky cocked his head and then settled his muzzle on his front paws to listen. Always Sean do this. Sean do that. Sean take out the garbage. Sean drop your pants and bend over and take it up the ass. Sean. The sound of high heels clicking on the linoleum of his kitchen floor cut him off. Sean dear. Janetta's sculpted tones matched her sculpted body, and Jeff couldn't help but lose his train of thought when she came at him like that. To him, Janetta was drop-dead gorgeous and buff as a female bodybuilder. She wanted to beat the shit out of him, she could, and he knew it. After her brother had died, she'd turned over a new leaf, went back to school on the Park Service's dime and gotten some kind of environmental degree. She'd eventually become the full-time head of the Animal Rights Coalition, as well as keeping her status as part-time ranger at Knightsbridge Canyon State Park. Obviously the salary at the nonprofit suited her better than the pay the government could provide. If she treated him like a scrub, she definitely made up for it in the bedroom. Today she was dressed in one of her favorite leather and latex outfits, suitable for indoor wear only. So where's the little mongrel? Janetta sing-songed in a way that made Spanky cringe. It made Sean think of Cruella de Vil in that dog movie. Why, there you are. I bet your owners are worried sick about you. But don't you worry. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. With a flick of her single-tail whip, she soon had Sean Gottlieb crawling on all fours behind her. Every time the leather tip hit him, he shuddered with a mixture of pain and pleasure, anticipating what was to come. It was so bad but so good anyway. Spanky hunkered down, put his paws over his eyes, and dreamed about home. Chapter 20. I woke up the next morning to a silent house and a note from Will. Gone to Simo. Back later. Stay safe, Will. Saxo. I patted down into the living room and got a glass of orange juice from the kitchen when I heard voices coming from the garage. I tiptoed into the laundry room and put my ear to the garage door as my sister began to talk. It was him, Al. It was Sean Gottlieb. He was Janetta's boyfriend back in high school, and they're still together. I saw it all in my dream. He's been doing the dirty work for Janetta, and she's still pissed off because Shane went out with Ashley that night instead of me, and he got mauled by a mountain lion or whatever it was back when we were in high school. What do you want me to do, Amber? Dreams aren't exactly probable cause, not to mention the overtime costs to the city, Elle argued. I have to have a good reason to request Hernandez put him under surveillance. Something better than my girlfriend had a vision and our dog has been kidnapped. Holy shit, I thought. Maybe Amber's talents weren't so latent as Mom suggested. Speaking of Mom, it's not polite to eavesdrop on your sister, you know, she admonished, sticking her ghostly head up out of the washing machine. I yelped and retreated out to the backyard, Mother following me as I lit up a clove and stared at the sky. Who thought that such a cozy little town could harbor such unknown weirdness? Then again, in all those books and movies it was always in some little town or remote place, usually in Maine or Idaho or Vermont or somewhere. Amityville Horror, Pet Sematary, The Shining, Misery, Twilight Eyes, Casper the Friendly Ghost. Yeah, that one had scared the hell out of me as a kid. She learned that from you and Dad, you know. I snapped at her. Learned what? My mother said as she stepped down onto the 12-inch sunning slab that cradled one corner of the black-bottomed swimming pool. Having your fights out of sight and out of earshot. It's incredibly frustrating, you know. And now Amber's just like you too. No PDA in front of the peasants and no arguing in front of the children. Made the rest of us feel like mental defects going at it all the time. Yes, well, your father wanted to show a united front when it came to parenting. And we were much too concerned about what other people thought than what kind of damage we were doing to you kids at the time. I think you passed on that little foible to Amber as well. Sometimes I don't think she's even human. Always worried about how it looks on the outside when who gives a shit about comportment when your family is being threatened? Swear you wouldn't even think she was gay except she and Elle sleep in the same bedroom. Ouch. Did I really go there? They're more like sisters? Like you two used to be before you started squabbling all the time? Are you jealous of Elle? No, maybe. And when did that happen, Mom? Huh, when did we start squabbling? All the time. When you... Mom looks sad. You say that as if I wanted to die and leave you kids alone. If you just thought about it a minute, you'd realize it's just the opposite. Know what? I did. With all the stress and stuff, maybe this wasn't a good time to have arguments with my dead mother, but then again, when is a good time? But I knew what she meant. I think that she was here now as best she could be because she hadn't wanted to leave us. I get it, Mom. I'm sorry. Hard to argue with cancer. Your father and I did our best, dear, she said sadly. We were flawed human beings too, just like everyone. Your sister is also doing the best she knows. How, Ashley? Don't judge her until you can walk a mile in her shoes. You can't even fathom the responsibility she feels. Responsibility? What responsibility? She has a son now, and she always felt responsible for you, and when I died, she felt responsible for your father and Adam, and now with Spanky gone. Hey, where is Spanky anyway? I asked off the cuff, hoping to surprise her into answering. I don't know, Ashley. I pass it on if I knew, but even though I'm like this, I can only be in one place at a time. I can't go floating through thousands of houses checking every room. Mom sighed. You have no idea how much strength it takes to manifest even to you. I ignored her troubles and said, oh, and by the way, when were you going to tell me that Amber's visions were back? I remembered she'd had a few over the years. They seemed to come in clusters. It wasn't my place. My mother gave me that sad smile, the one that said it was only going to get worse before it got better, and then she faded out. The back door opened right then and my twin came out to join me. The morning was fairly quiet and unseasonably warm. Amber handed me my favorite, a glass of cherry limeade with a sprig of mint on the top, and then crossed her arms and stared into my eyes. I need to tell you something, she said, after a few moments' silence. I kept my mouth shut and just nodded. When my better judgment was in control, I'd learned that the less I said, the better I did when it came to our relationship. Seems family always takes aim at each other until a common antagonist comes along. Maybe this was an opportunity. You know those visions I used to have as a kid? Like the night we found you on the slopes of the canyon near Shane's body. Uh-huh. I sat down on the edge of the pool and wiggled my toes in the cold water, more from an excuse to do something than a desire for relief. Well, they never really stopped. In fact, they've been getting clearer and more frequent lately. Uh-huh, I murmured again. I think Janetta MacDonald wants you dead, Ashley. Or at least she wants some kind of revenge. I saw it last night in a dream. Remember her creepy boyfriend, Sean? Snort. You mean her weirdo plaything? I laughed again. Yes, well that. I dreamed that Sean is going to try to kidnap you. I don't know when or how, but it's going to happen and we've got to try to prevent that. What did you see? I asked, an uneasy trepidation creeping over me. Werewolves and shapeshifters, sure, those I could handle. But seers and oracles. I was way out of my depth. It was just flashes. But I think you should stay away from the caves up in the canyon. I think she's going to try to get you up there. And if she does, it's not going to be good. We should tell Elle. Amber shook her head. She doesn't believe me, not really. I mean, she believes I had the dreams, but she's a cop first and a lawyer second, and neither of those professions are big on the visions or clairvoyance or whatever it is. So you want to do something behind her back? Not really. Just without telling her. Same thing, Em, I snapped. Fine, whatever. She threw up her hands and started to walk away. Amber, I'm sorry. I got up and put my hands on her arms from behind, turning her around. For a moment it was like looking in a mirror. I think I'm just so used to saying no when you say yes. I'll try to work on that, okay? I could see her eyes tear up for a moment. Okay. She hugged me for real for the first time in a long time, and I hugged her back, and for a little while I wondered why I was ever mad at her. So what are we going to do? I finally asked as we broke our slightly awkward embrace. Amber grinned, showing a bit of that cruel streak I knew so well. I think we need to even the odds. I wept as my gorgeous tresses hit the floor. No, really. I mean it. You think Bambi cried when his mother died? That was nothing. It had taken me 3 years to grow my hair out and get the color right. And to add insult to injury, it was my sister who did the cutting. Oh, didn't I tell you? Amber had been a beautician before she got her job with the city manager's office. Unlike other hairstylists, she could never cut her own hair. She could do other people. But whenever she took the scissors to her own hair, it turned out looking like a hack job performed by a weed eater. With my hair, I had to admit she had always been good at it. So when she got through with my new bob, once again we looked exactly alike. It was cute, but it wasn't me. I sighed. Don't worry, Ashley, Will said. It's just hair. It will grow back. I wish you'd stop acting like it's the end of the world, Amber said. Better a few strands of hair than getting your head chopped off by a psycho killer. Well, gee, when you put it that way. The key was to make sure that most people, Janetta McDonald and Sean Gottlieb particularly, weren't able to easily tell who was who when it came to Amber and me. We would make sure to never be alone and trade off swapping cars and outfits and significant others. I laughed ironically as I looked forward to dolling up in Amber's designer outfits. For once Amber couldn't complain that she was worried I would ruin her clothes. All I had to do was give her some of her own medicine. Better a few scrapes on the Dior and the Blanix than getting my head chopped off. I would say. That was something to look forward to. Chapter 21. After a couple of weeks of the Amber and Ashley switcheroo review with nothing to show for it but a bunch of pictures of us doing the Doublemint twins, no movement on the case and no new threats, we stopped worrying about who was wearing what and where, and we just tried to live our lives the best we could. The hole in the family where Spanky used to be remained constantly in our minds. Less in mine and Will's, I have to admit, as he wasn't our dog. Amber seemed to take my word for it that the heart hadn't been his, and she hadn't had any bloody visions of his death, or any visions for that matter, so she managed to get by. Elle was hit the hardest. Cops, or former cops anyway, don't like to be stymied and helpless. They want to do something, solve something, bring the bad guy to justice. Suffice to say, it was an uneasy 2 weeks. My bullet wound was nearly healed, although Will found some sadistic pleasure in tickling the sensitive skin around the area in the few times when we were able to forget about the threat to my life. I snapped at him, he growled good-naturedly at me, and I kept wondering when I would screw things up again. I thought about going all the way with him, I really did. I know some of you girls are just screaming at me right now, get it done already. But that's an irrevocable step I just didn't want to take right then. Not that my body didn't agree with you. Besides, Mother had warned me that lycanthropy could make hormonal birth control fail, and other methods were too iffy. A girl's gotta think about these things, you know, and I wasn't ready for a baby or a litter of puppies or whatever might come forth. As long as I held a furry secret, I didn't know how I was going to make it work. But as I said, we did the best we could, and Will didn't seem like he was going anywhere. What did I do to deserve him? He kept telling me that love wasn't about deserving things, that all of us deserve love but none of us can earn it, which made no sense to me at the time, but I know it's true now. My editor had finally called with a new contract for Spa Review magazine and a promise never to let the boys try to do a guest column again when their patently sexist version of my work was met with extreme disapproval by my female fans. Guys just have no idea what a woman wants in a spa, but us girls know that it's not about how hot the steam bath is or how long the lap pool is. It's about the service and the pampering. Never send a man to do a woman's job, I smirked internally. Serves them right. And it gave me leverage to take a much-needed vacation until the holidays were over, though I made a mental note to keep some kind of general column in reserve for situations like this. Well, not exactly like this, but you know what I mean. Anything unexpected. I tried to draft something, but my heart just wasn't in it. A dark shadow hovered over Knightsbridge and the canyon that Halloween. We all spent it out at the movies, sick of staying home. Our parents had made this a Scott family tradition, as Mother hadn't approved of all the death and darkness underlying the campy celebrations, and Dad just didn't like all the kids ringing the doorbell. Talk about your total irony, huh? If I can get Mom to stay still for long enough, I think I'll bring that up to her sometime and see what she has to say. Chapter 22. At the end of another frustrating day, I opened up the newspaper. Yet, Knightsbridge still had one in real print, delivered by real paperboys on real bicycles in the afternoon. I was taking my life in my hands being the first to see it because Elle liked to sit down to dinner and be the first, but I figured I could roll it up again and put the rubber band around it with no one the wiser. I wish I hadn't. The Gazette offered up a 1-2 punch with an article about Janetta McDonald's Animal Rights Commission and their ties to the local animal shelter. Below the byline was a picture of a miniature schnauzer, and although I tried to keep it from my sister, the sixth sense she had didn't let me get that far before she questioned me about what I was hiding behind my back. Reluctantly I showed her. It's not Spanky, I said. It just looks like him. Will and I already went over to look. They're rubbing it in our faces, Ash. What the hell are we going to do? She looked at me with puffy accusing eyes. Something I should have done long ago, I told her, and grabbed the keys to the pickup I'd borrowed. Will hadn't shown up from work yet, so I didn't have to fend him off. I wasn't going to drag him up for a supernatural rendezvous. Least not yet. I headed up the canyon as night fell and a sliver of the new moon showed above. Fortunately, I didn't have to worry about being dragged into a change. Lover's Leap looked just like I left it 10 years ago. Shane McDonald was still waiting. Hello, Ash. His ghostly form took solidity as he leaned against the rock, crossing his arms. Hey, Shane. Been waiting long? I asked and then grimaced. What was I thinking? I still wasn't used to this I see dead people thing, and though I saw ghosts from time to time, I never investigated, never talked to them. Until now. Shane laughed sadly. 7 years too long. Or is it 8? I'm kinda losing track. It's been 10. You're my second, you know, I told him. Second what? Second real ghost I've talked to. But the other one is Mom, so I guess you're my first non-family haunting. How did you know I would be here? He asked. I just knew. I've always known you were waiting, not at peace, I said. If it's any consolation, I'm really sorry I chickened out of coming up here before. Oh, and that I killed you. Oh, that no biggie, he said. So Ash, now that you're here, we really need to talk. I know why I need to talk to you, Shane. To, pardon the pun, lay some ghosts to rest. Why do you need to talk to me? Same reason, except the ghost is me. Same reason. Yeah, you need to forgive yourself, Ashley. I know that. I pounded the heels of my hands lightly against my head. In my brain I know that, but in my heart, a hell of a lot easier said than done. At least you're facing up to the problem now, instead of running away. Yeah, I am a mentai. A ment isn't a word, Ash, Shane said with a flash of that smile. It is now. I write for a living, so I should know. You run away for a living, Ash. You write for a paycheck. Ouch. And how do you know all these things? Have you been haunting me? Shane smiled. Now and again. When you do something near enough to hear the farther away, the harder it is to go there. That makes sense. Maybe I should become a ghostwriter. Interview the spirits. Funny. That's what I always liked about you, you know? Your sense of humor. Too bad your sister is losing hers. I sighed and ran my fingers through my irritatingly short hair. It's not her fault. Like Mom said, she feels responsible for everything and she hasn't run. I ran, and now that I've come back, I kinda know what that's like. Feeling responsible, I mean, like for my death. But you weren't responsible. It was your first change. How could you know? Shane put his ghostly arms around me and I could almost feel them. If not me, then who? Nobody, maybe. Sometimes in life shit just happens. I grunted. Tell that to your sister. I've tried. She won't let it go. Janetta hates me, she hates you, and she hates herself. In fact, she hates everything around her. I can't even get near her anymore. There's so much black energy coming off her. I don't know what she's gotten herself into, but it's not good. I turned around and Shane's arms blew away into wispy mist before reforming where they were supposed to. What about Spanky? I asked. Who? Ellen Amber's dog. Oh, I have no idea. Damn it. I rubbed my arms as the wind started to pick up across the plateau. Can you find out? Shaking his head, he said. Not really. Why not? I snapped, then realized how selfish that sounded. I mean, I would really appreciate it if you could. Because I'm at peace now, Ash. I'm leaving tonight. What? You can't be. What about me forgiving myself and all that? You're on your way, Ash, and the other side is calling me. I have to face up to my own ghosts and their judgment now. My mind whirled, and I wanted to ask him 1,000 questions about everything. Ghosts knew the afterlife and souls and God and stuff like that, but it was too late. Shane had already started to fade. His fingertips brushed my cheek, and this time I did feel them as tears flowed down my face. Goodbye, Shane. Forgive me. I did. I do. were the last words I heard from him. Now there's irony. Chapter 23. Still no dreams or visions, huh? I asked Amber the first morning of the homecoming week festivities. The Knightsbridge High Schools always held theirs later than anyone else right after Halloween. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was because being in the western foothills of the Sierra extended our autumn weather and people like to have something between the end of October and Thanksgiving. I can't manufacture them, Ashley. They come when I don't want them, they don't when I do. She changed the subject. So, I guess you're playing in the game tonight. I laced up my high tops and the smell of leather hit me. I inhaled and relaxed. I was actually looking forward to getting rid of some of my feeling of helplessness, anxiety and aggravation on the basketball court at the alumni games that night. Yeah, I replied. I figured as long as I'm here, it's a good enough reason to slam some backboards. Yes, well, don't be alone and don't take any drinks from strange water bottles. I looked at her alarmed. Will and the team will be with me the whole time. But do I really need to worry about getting roofied? Just be cautious. She pulled me into her arms. Yeah, well, you too. I hugged her back then stepped out of Elle's way as she poked me in the side. Besides, I'll be there and packing, Elle said. Why doesn't that make me feel better? I teased. But I really did feel better, I mean. In a big place like that, surrounded by lots of people. What could happen? Shit, I so did not think that, did I? The women's varsity versus alumni game was like a powder puff match on steroids. I'd forgotten how good it felt to work as a team and my former classmates seemed to take it all in stride. I still had my jump shot and my hang time was legendary. But what these girls didn't know was that I had a Lupin ace up my sleeve. I could dunk at least on a regulation high school basket. Like I said, my monthly wolf run seemed to put my body into top physical condition. Lucky me. It was late in the fourth quarter when the scent came to my nostrils. I stood at the free throw line after sinking the first of two when I smelled him. Smelled Spanky. At least I thought it was Spanky. But there was a stale aspect to the spoor, as if the vitality of the dog was layered in an olfactory residue of other canines, some of them dead. My lip turned up at the thought of the violation of my pack. Yeah, somehow with the scent came the reminder that Spanky was just that. Packmate. I nailed the second free throw. As soon after as I could, I ferreted out the location of the Spanky smell. Sean Gottlieb was wearing the uniform of the Animal Rescue Clinic and stood on the sidelines behind the other basket, holding a covered pet carrier. That was where it came from. We took up defensive positions around the key, and I waited to make my move. Cassandra Jenkins, wiry hotshot and point guard, took a dribble past me when I snatched the ball right out of her hands. Before I could even think I had loped down the court, and after hitting my layup, I sent my body flying into Sean Gottlieb, knocking the carrier to the floor. On the ground, I rolled over to look into the crate. Inside I could see frightened miniature schnauzer. It wasn't Spanky. Sean paled as I looked into his eyes. Ashley, isn't it? He smirked nervously. Just couldn't pass up a good game of b-ball, could you? It sounded like a line he had memorized. I snarled and left him standing there. The bastard was taunting me, but his heart wasn't in it, so I knew who had put him up to it. Amber looked over from the sidelines. She and some of the other alumni cheerleaders had squeezed back into their old outfits and were doing a creditable job of rallying our fans. I shook my head and shrugged. Time to finish this basketball game, and then we needed to finish the other game that someone was playing, because I had smelled Spanky on Sean even though our dog hadn't been in the carrier. His scent had been fresher than the 3 weeks it had been since he'd gone missing, so the little weasel had to know where he was, had to have been in contact with him at some point. I hate to gloat, but we toasted those kids. I knew when I was in high school that alumni games were about celebrating the ones who'd gone before. Why not? Let us bask in being a big shot for one night, even if I'm only reliving the fading dreams of my childhood. Back then I'd thought about going and playing college ball, even maybe working my way to a women's pro league before the incident sidetracked me. I even had a standing offer to assistant coach if I was willing to move back to town. It wouldn't have been hard. I had to admit, it made me feel pretty good to know I wasn't a total pariah as I collected quite a few pats on the back or the ass as I headed back to the locker room. I took a shower with the rest of the team and then hurried back out to the bleachers to watch Amber announcing the year's nominees for homecoming court. Standing there on the sidelines with Will at my back, feeling guilty for feeling so good, I asked myself what kind of person I was and what did I really want. Lonely but glamorous travel all over the world, or coming home to deal with real life and oh by the way no more free spa trips and an expense account. What a quandary. Then my hackles started to rise. Janetta MacDonald stood behind the platform next to the stage and I realized that she was waiting to make an announcement, as she wore that animal rescue clinic uniform and carried a pet crate. If she hadn't come here for something official, she would have been dressed to the nines as she usually was. I grabbed Will's arm and pointed. Will turned to where I was looking and said, "Stick close to me," as he pulled me through the crowd. Elle got there first. "And may I ask what you have there, Miss MacDonald?" she was saying as we rounded the back of the bandstand where they were waiting. "Well, since you know the Animal Rights Commission and the Animal Rescue Clinic has long been a supporter of the community, we thought we'd drum up some compassion for the animal shelter by showing one of our adoptees. Hopefully we can find him a good home." "Him, eh? Oh yes. He's just the cutest little thing. A couple of kids turned him in a few weeks ago and even though he was in pretty bad shape we nursed him back to health and now he's better than before." "May I?" Elle said. Amber was watching out of the corner of her eye and I shrugged my shoulders. I already knew it wasn't Spanky. But Amber didn't know that and I could see her disappointment as Elle removed the animal. He looked like Spanky but up close Amber could see he wasn't. I looked into Janetta's eyes and saw a flash of victory there. Her pulse rate sped up and I gaped at her. She was actually getting off on this. I was so going to terminate that bitch. "Let's go," I said to Will. "I don't think I can stomach this anymore." He walked me back to the locker room. "I'll just get my things," I told him and I slipped inside to retrieve my gym gear from the locker, ignoring the cleaning in progress floor sign. The place was a haze of moisture as I maneuvered around the wet patches yet to be mopped up by the janitor. The man shoved his mop here and there as his head bobbed and he hummed to himself beneath long hair and a ball cap, his shoulders hunched. My sense of smell got overwhelmed by perfumes, deodorants, and cleaning fluid scents, or maybe I could have avoided what happened next. My bag was right where I left it on top of the lockers and as I climbed up on a bench to retrieve it I felt a sharp pain in my ass overlaid right on top of the still healing scar. Instinctively stepping down, I slipped in soapy water and landed on my back. I smelled blood and rolled over, reaching down to where the pain had bit me. My hand came away bloody and in my palm was a smashed tranquilizer dart. Seriously? In the ass again? Those were my last thoughts before darkness took me. Chapter 24. When I awoke, I found myself tied back to back with my sister in a hot, smoky cavern deep in the heart of Knightsbridge Canyon. I'd been here before in wolf form as I'd explored every bit of the area around town between the incident and leaving home. A certain set of stalactites that looked like a hanging line of banners made me sure. My eyes watered and my pulse raced, fighting off the effects of whatever they'd shot me with. I knew my body was trying to drive the drug out of my system. Looking around I saw that Amber and I were flanked by a deep depression like a medieval fire pit, filled with red-hot coals and rising heat waves. To the left I saw the climbing flames of a bonfire. Large ancestor rocks ringed it, touching the flames. I recognized them from research I had done on the Cherokees for a travel piece about casino resorts. Wicker scaffolding arched above us. What I realized was the skeleton of a sweat lodge. A sweat lodge in a cavern? Sean Gottlieb tended the fire, half naked with his shirt tied around his waist, and a handkerchief across his face like a bandit. He had welts and scars crisscrossing his back and shoulders and I wondered what had made them then. Winced as I speculated about his and Janetta's relationship. I heard a bark to my right and saw Spanky pawing at the bars of a cage, looking worriedly at me. "Spanky," I breathed. "Amber, it's Spanky," I hissed. Amber didn't answer. Must still be out from whatever they shot her with, I thought. I was a Lupin and in better physical shape than my sister, so naturally I would awaken first. I felt the heat begin to rise as Sean shoveled some hot ancestor rocks into the depression near my feet. I stared up at him but he didn't look at me. Until I spoke. "Why are you doing this?" I croaked. Spanky barked and Sean looked away, not saying anything. He went over to pour some water into a bowl and slid it into the cage. Well, he seemed to like animals. That might be something I could work with. Could I get some water over here? I coughed. He didn't answer, but brought a water bottle to me and held my chin up as he poured some into my mouth. Thank you, I said. Now give some to Amber. She's still out. He looked at me for a moment in apology, and then turned to walk away. Before I could pursue that thought, Janetta MacDonald strode through the cave entrance. She wore a dark bustier and a pair of black chinos with matching Doc Martens laced up the ankles, and I had to admit she looked kind of hot. For a raving lunatic, that is. At least Amber would approve of her taste in S&M fashion. Wouldn't want to be murdered by a tacky Vogue reject after all. Ah, you're awake. Good. It's just about time to start the ceremony. What the hell are you doing, Janetta? I coughed and elbowed Amber in the back. I got a grunt in response, which made me think she was playing possum. And buying time, hopefully thinking of a way out of this mess. Mother, I sent out a silent prayer or plea or mental message, whatever you do to call ghosts. What I thought she could accomplish, I had no idea. You'll find out soon enough. Janetta smirked and turned toward me, taking a burgundy-colored velvet bag from her belt and raising it up to the ceiling, while she began to chant. The cloth in her hands was threaded with amber strands that caught the light and seemed to spangle symbols across the cavern walls. Sean proceeded to pull dark cloth over the bamboo, and the little light we had dimmed as he affixed blankets to the semicircular poles. Janetta approached with a wooden mixing bowl and pulled a hunting knife off her leg harness. It's probably obvious that this is going to hurt, she said with glee, grinning triumphantly as she sliced a gash in my jeans and thigh, and then held the bowl beneath it. I clenched my teeth, hissing against the pain as I tried to jerk away, but we were too securely held, not like in the movies where the villain always leaves the bonds too loose or easy to reach and untie. Amber wasn't so stoic. You bitch, she screamed when Janetta cut her language, Amber. I laughed sardonically. Bite me, Ashley, she snarled. You got us into this. Funny you should say that, I replied, but Janetta cut us off. Girls, Janetta chided us as she took her knife and sliced a few hairs from both our heads and added them to the bowl. She then went to the cage and had Sean pull Spanky out. Shit. Keep her talking, Ashley, Amber muttered, and I could feel her manipulating her wrists to try to get her hands free. Good luck with that. I had already tried, and I was stronger and more limber than my sister. Hold him still, Janetta ordered as Sean lifted the squirming dog. Spanky hated being held by anyone but our family. What are you doing? I demanded as she raised her knife. I thought you were an animal rights activist? Or was that all bullshit like the rest of your life? Hey, it was all I could think of at the time. Oh, don't worry. I like dogs more than I like people. Then she turned back to Sean, who was frowning at her. Present company excluded, of course. Spanky froze in Sean's grip. He seemed to know when danger was coming, and he bared his teeth. Don't even think about it. She narrowed her eyes at him as Sean held Spanky's mouth shut while he snarled. If you hurt my dog, Amber began, but then I smelled an acrid smell of hair burning, and heard a yelp of surprise and a curse as Spanky went flying out of Sean's arms to hit the ground running. I could hear his barking fading in the distance, and I thanked the Lord that at least one of our pack had made it out unscathed. On the other hand, you would think that he'd show a bit more loyalty. I didn't know you were such a witch, Janetta, Amber snarled. A bitch. Well, that I knew. But blood magic? Are you sure you know what you're doing? Interesting. What did Amber know about magic beyond reruns of Charmed and Once Upon a Time? I started to get the feeling she'd been holding out on me again. You don't think I came into this unprepared, do you? Janetta mocked. I looked at her blankly, and sensed Amber doing the same, if perhaps with slightly more comprehension. See, I know what you are, Janetta continued. Oh really? I matched her haughty tone. And what do you think that is? Coughed. Ye nald Lushii. The words came out of her in a hiss, and a malevolent gleam sparked from her eyes. A shiver ran through me. Janetta poured more noxious herbs over the fire. Anti-Ninii. Her voice got louder, and I feel an ache behind my jaw. Adagash. Her voice took on the cadence of a song as she screamed the last words. As it, ne yald Lushii. Ashley. Amber's voice rose into a different register, and I could feel my own anxiety begin to rise with hers as I felt the pads of my fingers tear and claws burst out from my knuckles, straining the tension of the rope that bound us. Blood ran down my wrists and the smell made me woozy. Holy shit. I thought. She was doing it. Janetta MacDonald was making me shift. Inaldlishii. Skinwalker. She called me a skinwalker. I'd run into the Navajo legend when I first started researching werewolf mythology back in high school. But I wasn't a skinwalker. I was something else, product of a different magic. I don't know how you managed that, Amber whispered. She couldn't see that. The sharp things her hands touched were actually a part of me rather than rocks or knives. Who knows what she thought? But I could feel her sliding the hemp fibers across my claws, causing them to part, bit by bit, as she sawed at our bonds. Me neither, I said. Werewolves, shifters, all the same thing, Janetta cackled. I knew it all along. But she was wrong. The legend of the skinwalker said that a shapeshifter utilized rituals to assume the form of a beast. In doing so, she would shed her human skin to become the shape of the animal she wanted to change into. But it cost a blood sacrifice to do so. In order to return to human form, a skinwalker had to consume her own human pelt, eyeballs, scalp and all. Besides being totally gross and nasty, I wasn't a skinwalker, or a Navajo. On the other hand, there had to be some kind of overlap because whatever she had done had affected me. After you killed my brother, I spent years researching the legends of your kind. In my travels, I found a tribal elder who was willing to share with me the secrets of your people. What Scottish people? What my people? I barely knew what I was. He said if I could force the shape of the wolf onto you while the moon was waning and then burned your skin, you would be bound into your shifted form for the rest of your days. You're insane. I laughed uproariously, which made Janetta furious. Ashley, my twin said, don't antagonize the psycho. We'll find out who's insane now, won't we? Janetta said tightly. Sean, cover them up and then go look for that damn dog. We need it. As she said this, I realized that I could still hear Spanky barking from outside the cave. I guess the little furball hadn't run off after all. Amber whimpered as the cloth concentrated the smoke around us. The heat began to become unbearable as Janetta chanted and threw blood and herbs into the fire, causing more choking fumes. My head began to swim and I could hear Amber retching. I think I'm going to be sick, she said, and then she passed out, her body going slack against me. Janetta's annoying noises stopped and it sounded like she moved away, probably to prepare her next round of tortures. I could hear her chanting start up again farther away. Hold on, Ambassador, I'll think of something. My claws were already out and I could feel my lupin side come out and take on that monochromatic perception where the olfactory senses filled in the visual details. I wondered if I could continue this partial shift. I never could quite do it before, and I ran the risk of hurting Amber badly if I had to go all the way. But if Janetta could force me into my wolf form, I couldn't guarantee that I could control it anyway. I didn't think I'd hurt my twin, but I hadn't ever been forced into the change before. I centered myself and felt the ropes dig deeper into my flesh. My vision began to blur and I got a bad taste in my mouth as my canines began to lengthen. Amber, forgive me for getting you into this mess, I said softly as darkness covered us and the muffled sounds of Janetta's chant faded away into the background. The sound of pine sap popping and the crackling of the coals around us seemed to get louder in my brain. Sweat poured down my face and I could feel it drenching my sister's back. She was unusually quiet, and I wondered if she'd passed out again. I kind of hoped she had, just in case. Amber, I'm here. She coughed. I've found if you take shallow breaths it's not that bad. I have a confession to make. What, that you're a werewolf and spend your full moons running around the hills and munching on forest critters, she said offhandedly. Ooh, big secret. You knew. I barked. The sound of betrayal echoed around me in the muffled silence. Of course I knew. Why do you think I worry about you all the time? And haven't you noticed that I always call you after a full moon to make sure you're okay? Seriously, Ashley, you're not a very good liar. Remember, we have the same face and I can read you like a book. Besides, visions, hello. I was floored. All this time she knew my secret and she never said a thing. So when were you going to tell me that you knew? It wasn't my place. When she said that, I could hear echoes of my mom in her words. Do you see Mother too? I asked, and before it was out of my mouth I knew it was the wrong thing to say. What do you mean? Crap. I was so not good at this. Finally I felt the rope fibers part and I stood. My mother's face hovered in the darkness, and I could see her putting her finger to her lips. Nothing. Just visions, hello, I said with as much snark as I could muster. I tore the restraints off my ankles and proceeded to set Amber free. There wasn't much room to maneuver, but I slid to the ground and lifted the cloth tarp to look out into the cavern. I couldn't be sure that Janetta didn't have more tranquilizer darts ready, and I wasn't about to waste this opportunity. I couldn't see much of anything. Amber, I need your eyes. Sorry, I'm using them, thank you, Amber said as she joined me on the ground. Her voice quavered a little as she stared into my face. Your eyes are different. Wolfie. Yeah, and that means I'm colorblind and can't see worth shit in this smoky mess. So tell me what you see. Where's Sean? Where's Janetta? She's right outside the cave entrance and what? I asked. Well, she's naked. Glad I can't see that. Actually. Focus, Amber. No time to go admiring her killer bod. That's a bit too apropos. And she's holding some kind of pelt up to the sky. The sound of chanting rose again, and then came a whoosh. I felt my whole body go rigid. Oh, I said. What? Amber whispered. What just happened? I ground out, my tongue getting hung up on my teeth. She dropped the pelt into the fire. I moaned and could feel my bones begin to turn and bend and crack. Ashley. Amber grabbed my face and looked into my eyes. She must not have liked what she saw there, because she scrabbled back away from me. What? I coughed. My body, I hardly felt human anymore, and I probably wasn't. Mostly. My, what incredibly big teeth you have. Yeah, well, humor was one of our strengths. Laughing in the face of danger. That, and making lemonade out of lemons. Someone should tell Janetta to be careful what she conjured, or she might get it. Or it might get her. I struggled with my clothes for a moment before I got free of them. With a roar, I leaped from the folds of the sweat lodge and slammed headlong into something. Stars danced in my optic nerves as I stumbled leftward, rubbing up against a barrier I couldn't see or smell. Looking up, I saw Janetta continuing her ritual incantations, and I instinctively tried to rush her again, but I couldn't reach her. I felt as if a wall of glass stopped me, and made my sensitive nose burn as I pushed against it. On the ground I could see an elaborate symbol drawn, some kind of wheel shape, like a dream catcher or magic circle. I tried to scratch at it with my paw, but nothing I did could reach it. Turning, I growled and whined, looking around for some trick or way through. Whatever it was, it kept me out, and suddenly I was racked with another wave of pain, a convulsion that threatened to drive away my human mind, leaving only the animal. If that happened, Janetta would have the perfect revenge, destroying me with no real evidence of what had been done, nothing that would convict her in a court of law anyway. Ashley! My sister screamed from inside, and I rushed back into the cave. Amber grabbed the bamboo centerpost and brought the fabric down into the coals of the fire like the collapse of a teepee. Smoke poured out of the chamber as the material caught fire, and I leaped in to tug at the rope, still wringing one hand, leading her out into the open air. She collapsed, coughing and helpless. Another spasm went through me and I screamed, a horrible gut-wrenching sound, never meant to proceed from a canine throat. Spanky charged forward out of the darkness to nuzzle me in that way that dogs have, sensing another of its kind in pain. Or maybe he just knew I was family. Rolling over to stare into his eyes, I tried to make the little schnauzer to understand. I nudged him with my forehead, pushing him toward Janetta as she danced and gestured and spoke words of power, crawling toward the crazy witch. I tried to tell Spanky what to do. Somehow he got it. Maybe it was a dog thing, or maybe that speak with animals spell I always liked when we used to play D&D really worked, but he turned and began scratching at the design formed in the dirt by colored chalk. It only took a few strokes of Spanky's forepaws before he made a gash in its perfection, and I was able to press in close to help him. A few seconds more and we had an opening. I leaped through, and moments later, Janetta lay in shock beneath my snarling muzzle. At that moment, Will charged out of the darkness. Mom must have gotten through to him, or maybe he just decided to search Janetta's old stomping grounds and saw the fire. Or both. Unfortunately, he carried an axe, and he lifted it over his head in preparation for cleaving me in half. I froze with shock, disbelieving that he would ever do such a thing to me, before realizing that all he saw was a big wolf attacking a human woman. A naked human woman. EW. Will. Amber screamed as Spanky sank his teeth into Will's calf. What the? Will cried as he slapped at Spanky with one hand, forgetting about splitting my skull. The schnauzer dodged and barked, frantic. I backed away and then slunk in a circle to where Amber was climbing to her feet, fairly certain Will wouldn't attack her to get through to me. Will, leave the wolf alone. Janetta just tried to kill me and Ashley. Where is Ashley? Will asked, looking around, still hefting the axe. I held my pose and tried to will my sister to do what needed to be done. Guess some of it got through, or we simply thought alike as she said, Ashley's fine. Just tie that bitch up and gag her. It warmed my heart to hear my sister call someone else the B word. Confused, Will put the axe down, bound Janetta's hands, gagged her, and then threw a blanket over her. Our nemesis didn't protest or resist, seemingly in shock. Honey. Sean stumbled up behind us in the dark after giving up on catching the frantically dodging Spanky. Smoke continued to pour from the cavern as a wind drew it from the chamber. I leaped on him, driving him to the ground, and then Will tied him up too as I stayed out of the way. He kept looking at me, trying to figure it all out, but it was just too bizarre, I was sure. I mean, really, if it was you, would you deduce some wolf was your girlfriend without a lot of persuading or proof? Nearby, Spanky barked joyously around the ghost of my dead mother. She made a shushing motion and he calmed down and sat, staring up at her. What's he looking at? Amber asked me as she tried to brush her clothing clean, a hopeless exercise. I gave a non-committal yip as Mother put her finger to her lips. Why I couldn't just tell Amber I had no idea. Some kind of otherworldly rule or something, I guess. Fine, be that way, my sister said, as if she understood, which she probably did. So much for an honest relationship. Ouch. That stung, but I wasn't much on defying Mom when she was alive, and I sure wasn't going to when she was dead. Then I remembered Shane and wondered if this all would mean that she would find peace and cross over. Maybe that was why she didn't want me to tell Amber. Maybe resolving all that would send her away, and I abruptly knew that I did not want that to happen. Not at all. I'd rather have some of Mother here than all of her gone. Maybe that was part of what family is about. Who are you talking to, Amber? Will asked, still completely befuddled. He'd been all ready to rescue me, and instead found most of the rescuing all done. And me apparently not around to be saved. That's got to let a guy down for sure. Suddenly, Spanky tore away and scurried down the hillside toward the trailhead parking lot below. I could see lights from a car, and after baring my teeth at our prisoners one more time, I sat down and leaned into Amber, huddling together for warmth in the chill November breeze. She put her arm around me, like I was a dog or a child, and I rolled my shoulder and head into her lap, while she ran her hand through my fur. Weird, I know, but it felt right. When in Lupin, do as the Lupins do, I guess. Well, what do you know? Elle climbed up to the trail to the cavern, her hand on the .357 she carried at her hip. Looks like the gang's all here, she said, as she strode over to look down at the two bound miscreants. She didn't seem at all discomfited by the sight of a 100-pound wolf laying in her lover's lap. Lover's lap, lover's leap, whatever. Spanky cavorted around her feet until she told him to calm down, at which point he went over to sit next to the very subdued Sean, as if guarding him. Or maybe he was making some kind of statement about his human captor, that he was just as much a dog as any domestic canine. Janetta had certainly treated him like one, I found out later. My older brother Adam trailed behind Elle, a sword from his collection slung incongruously over his back. Hey there, girl. He winked at me and ruffled the fur on my head. What, did everyone know what I was and no one bothered to let me know they knew? I felt like I was left out of my own secret. I wondered if Dad knew. We kids had kept a lot of secrets from him growing up. Or thought we did, but I had to assume one of my siblings or Mom had informed him. In his phlegmatic way, he'd probably just shrugged when he'd gotten the news and said something like, "Oh, that's interesting." Then I wondered what other things I didn't know that the others were keeping from me. I mean, if I had this werewolf thing going on and Amber had her visions and Mom was a ghost, and here my brother was carrying a very real and very sharp sword, ready to smite our enemies, it hardly bore thinking about. Really made my eyes water with that cringy feeling I get when I've been stupid or oblivious for quite a while and suddenly realize it. I heard Elle talking to Chief Hernandez on her cell, directing a unit up the canyon to the trailhead. Yeah, the old Indian cave. Will Stenfield saw the fire up here and called me. Moments later we saw flashing lights winding their way up the roads, switchbacks toward us. Elle called, "Hey Will, Why don't you meet the chief down at the trailhead? And look for Ashley while you're at it. She'd bound to be around here. Somewhere. Will obeyed like the beta he was. As I didn't have human speech just then, Amber filled Elle and Adam in on what our kidnappers had done. They walked over to Janetta and Sean, who lay on the ground in their bonds, defeated. Elle took the woman's gag off. You've been a very bad girl, MacDonald. You, too, Gottlieb. She made me do it, Sean said. Shut up, Sean, Janetta said without heat. No, Janetta. He spat her name like a curse. You can't make me do things anymore. Oh, Sean, she sighed. I never made you do anything you didn't already want to. I thought as I watched, isn't that how life's devils always do it? The bound woman turned her smarmy smile up toward Elle. Actually, for the record, I didn't do anything at all. In fact, I tried to rescue these two from this nut here. She jerked her head at Sean. Save it, Adam said. If Sean testifies, and I bet the city attorney here will offer some kind of deal, there will be multiple witnesses telling all about your crimes, not to mention the physical evidence such as misused tranquilizer darts from the animal clinic's inventory. But if it goes to trial, I'll tell everyone what she is. Janetta pointed her chin at me, and I pulled my lips back from my teeth. Right. Adam laughed in that superior way he had that I had always hated. Right now, though, I could have kissed him. Or at least licked his face. Whatever. He continued. They'll just cart you off to the nut house. Unless that's your strategy? Insanity plea. Janetta sagged and lowered her eyes. Just get it over with, she muttered. When we saw the cops climbing the trail, Will in tow, Amber suddenly shook me. You gotta go, she whispered, and I realized she was right. I'll tell them. You got away first and must be out there somewhere. That's not even a lie. She grinned. I chuffed once, nuzzled her neck, and then ran up the hillside. Banky barked. And I could see my mother waving to me from her position floating above the whole scene like some Christmas angel. I guess there really are wolves in Knightsbridge Canyon after all, I heard Adam say as I loped off into the darkness.